Hitler's closing arguments, March 27, 1924. Honorable gentlemen, in the indictment, I read the following statement. Admittedly, what happened in November 1918, the ousting of the federal princes by the Council of People's Deputies, was a crime of high treason. At that time, the new government took over the whole Reich in a very short time. The supreme power of government was in fact in the hands of the people's deputies, and thus the state of affairs was made legal. This is recognized law. If this theory were true and became law, the fetters of Germany could never be loosened, for it would mean that we too are defeated, cast down and gagged by power. But might is not identical with right. Frederick the Great once uttered a statement that clearly defines the relationship between might and right. He said that the law is worthless if it is not defended by the point of a sword. In other words, the law was still worthless if there was no power to back it. I will point out a few practical examples from recent history. In April 1919, a small band of criminals overthrew the current revolutionary government and set up a new one of their own. The Soviet flags were brought out, and those men unquestionably took actual power. Nevertheless, this power did not exist legally, and even if the Soviet powers were to seize the whole of Germany and the whole of Europe, the day would come when they too would fall. We can see the same thing in Hungary. There too, Bela Kun set up a red regime. He too took absolute power and asserted himself everywhere. A small group of freedom fighters helped to reimpose the true law. A small minority technically tyrannized Hungary at that time, but this minority actually represented the true Hungarian people. How did Bismarck handle the constitutional conflict? He disregarded the constitution, parliament, and the overwhelming majority, and ruled, relying only on the state's means of power, on the army, on the body of civil servants, and on the crown. This was described in the opposition press as a breach of the Constitution and high treason. What legalized Bismarck's act? His act might indeed have been high treason, had it not been out of this deed that the blessing came, which led the German people to its unity, to its highest achievement and freedom. On the day on which the German emperor was crowned, high treason was legalized before the German people and the whole world. We have two new coups d'etats happening before us. The Turkish General Kemal Pasha opposes the central government of Constantinople. He goes so far as to reject even the sacred authority of the head of the Mohammedan religion. If we ask what ultimately legalized this act, the answer is the achievement of freedom for his people. Mussolini's deed was legalized by the tremendous work of purification. The March on Rome was legalized on the day when Rome was purged of the manifestations of the decay of political life. What was the situation in Germany? What was the situation in our fatherland in 1918? Germany was not then so miserable and corrupt as to make revolution a natural necessity. The later Social Democratic Minister of the Interior, Heine, declared that the former Reich was without a doubt the most orderly administered country in the whole world. And so it was. No state had such an honorable, principled body of civil servants as the old Germany. No nation had an army in which such a high degree of honor had become a tradition, as internally, so externally. 26 foreign powers endeavored to bring this Reich down, and in 4 years of struggle they did not succeed, a proof of how formidable, strong, and powerful this Reich was. There was no cause for revolution. When we ask whether the revolution has succeeded, we must first examine what the revolution wanted. What did the revolution not promise our German people? A life of beauty and dignity and abundance, and less work than before. The struggle against the supranational power of international capital was preached, and what has been achieved? Here in the hall stood a general of the new Reich. He had to confess that the failure of this new power in the economic field was so appalling that the masses were being driven into the streets. But the soldiers who were supposed to shoot at the masses did not want to keep shooting at people who were driven to despair by the incompetence of their government. A more damning verdict cannot be reached. I do not want to talk about the hunger of millions, but only to point out the consequences of the destruction of our currency, which deprived thousands of people of the fruits of their labor. Economically, this revolution has become a tremendous misfortune. Our largest agricultural regions have been lost, and in a highly treacherous manner, regions that are a prerequisite for the nourishment of the nation have been sold off. We heard about the right of self-determination of peoples, about the League of Nations, about the self-government of the people. And what came of all that? World peace, but world peace built on a field of our bodies. Disarmament, but only the disarmament of Germany so it could be plundered. The right of self-determination, yes, but only for every tribe of Negroes, and Germany does not count as a tribe of Negroes. A League of Nations, but a League of Nations only as a guarantor for the fulfillment of the peace treaty, not for a better world order to come. The best proof of what I have said can be seen in the speech of the prosecutor himself. The prosecutor explained that the root cause of these events lies in the shattered authority of the state. What remnants of legitimate authority still exist today ultimately go back to the germ of today's Reich. It was Friedrich Wilhelm who founded the authority of the state. It was the great king who declared of himself, "I am a servant of the state." This applies in the same way right up to the old heroic emperor. We all still live by this state authority today. State authority was identical with the good of the people. It was not something opposed to the good of the people. Thomas Carlyle emphasizes that Frederick the Great's entire life was lived in the service of his people. The great debasement of the currency came, and what was felt most keenly among the people was that the man who had once been given 20,000 marks was now paid with 30,000 paper wipes. Respect for the law has decayed bit by bit because the law was no longer identical with morality. The legislators of today make laws without regard for ethics, morals, or decency. If the law is to be respected again in Germany one day, the first prerequisite is that the Reich emerge from its great misfortune. When did Germany's downfall begin? You know the slogan of the old German system in terms of foreign policy. It was preservation of world peace, economic conquest of the world. You cannot govern a nation with both principles. The preservation of world peace cannot be the goal and purpose of a state policy. Only the growth and preservation of a nation can be the goal. The world cannot be conquered by economic policy without this appearing as a threat to other nations. What is the state? Today, the state is an economic organization, an association of people, apparently for the sole purpose of securing each other's daily bread. But the state is not an economic organization. It is a national organism. The aim and purpose of the state is to give a people the sustenance and the position of power it deserves. The German people are perhaps in the most bitter position of all nations in Europe. Militarily, politically, and geographically, we are surrounded by nothing but rivals and can only hold our own if we ruthlessly put power politics in the foreground. What we did was hardly appealing. I remember a time when the stereotypical calls used to come from the masses: down with the reactionaries, warmongers, mass murderers. Hardly any of us have not been beaten bloody. What we did not do as demagogues, but in the feeling that it must happen, even if we should perish, not out of consideration of whether we would be victorious. We have acted in the consciousness that we are doing our duty, and we have done it. We have enlightened the masses. And when I mentioned the name of the Quartermaster General sitting before you, the cry even came, "Down with Ludendorff." If today a different cry rings back, and if people cheer us today, it is proof that the people are beginning to see clearly again, much to our joy. My friend Röhm also collaborated in this work of enlightening the masses in the Bund Reichskriegsflagge. He too was prepared to be spat upon and beaten, but to emphasize, "We are Germans and we are proud of it. We will not let our fatherland down." Lossow said here that he had spoken to me in the spring and had not observed at that time that I was striving for any position for myself, but that I only wanted to be a propagandist. How small people think. I do not regard the attainment of a ministerial post as worth striving for. I do not consider it worthy of a great man to want to be remembered by history merely for becoming a minister. One would also run the risk of being buried next to other ministers, and names like Scheidemann and Wutzelhofer come to mind. I did not want to be buried in the same tomb with them. What I had in mind from the first day was 1,000 times more than becoming a minister. I wanted to become the breaker of Marxism. I want to solve this issue, and if I did solve it, the title of minister would be a joke to me. When I first stood before Wagner's grave, my heart overflowed with pride that here rested a man who forbade himself from being commemorated Here rests Privy Councillor, Music Director, His Excellency Baron Richard von Wagner. I was proud that this man and so many men in German history were content to hand down their names to posterity, not their titles. It was not out of modesty that I wanted to be a drummer at that time. That is the highest goal. All else is a trifle. When the General State Commissariat was founded, I too underwent a change. Once I believed that perhaps I could lead the struggle against Marxism with the help of state power. January 1923 made me realize that this was hardly possible. The prerequisite for the defeat of Marxism is not that Germany should first be freed. Germany will never be free until Marxism is broken. At that time I withdrew and thought of nothing but strengthening the movement until it could sweep over the whole of Germany like a torrent. Herr von Kahr has stated here that he had hitherto not cared for politics until March 1920, when he was invited to get out of bed and enter politics. I take the view that the bird must sing because it is a bird. A man born for politics must do politics whether he is free or in prison, sitting in a silken chair or having to make do with a hard bench. The fate of his people will animate him from early morning till late at night. Kahr was even supposed to act as dictator once. I ask you to remember two statements made by this man. He said he didn't want to, but he was pushed. A second statement was that he had not pushed himself forward, but had been forced. He who is born to be a dictator is not pushed, but wants to be, is not pushed forward, but pushes himself forward. It is not presumptuous of a laborer to push himself to hard work. Is it perhaps presumptuous of a man with a highly intellectual mind to brood for nights on end until he finally gives mankind an invention? He who feels himself called to govern a people has no right to say, "If you wish for it and fetch me, I will go along." He has the duty to govern. Do you think that this man, von Kahr, is the German Scharnhorst, York, or Gneisenau, or the Freiherr vom Stein, for instance, who proclaimed with a hate-filled heart that he would crush Napoleon? Ultimately, what was missing from Kahr, in my eyes, is the characteristic of the great man. Herr von Kahr was popular. What he lacked was what Mussolini recently expressed in his proclamation: "I would not want to live in this world if I did not know that I was surrounded by a thicket of love and of hate." Kahr had popularity, but not the stones to endure hatred. He was not a heroic figure. Do you think it would be presumptuous of me, knowing this man so well, to declare at once when he wanted to win me over that a struggle under such leadership seemed to me to be hopeless? People are surprised at our unity, despite different formal views. They say of me that I am ultimately a Republican, of Pöhner that he is a monarchist, of Ludendorff that he is loyal to the House of Hohenzollern. It is proof of the power of an idea to unity such diverse people. Germany's fate lies not in the form of the republic or monarchy, but in the content of the republic or the monarchy. What I am fighting against is not the form of government as such, but the disgraceful content. We wanted to create the conditions in Germany which alone would make it possible for the iron grip of our enemies to be lifted from our neck. We wanted to create order in the national budget, expel the leeches, take up the fight against the international enslavement of the stock exchange, against the enslavement of our entire economy, the fight against the politicization of the trade unions, and above all, we wanted to reintroduce the highest duty of honor that we knew as Germans, the duty to bear arms in compulsory military service. And here I ask you, is what we wanted high treason? Finally, we wanted our people to rise up against the threat of enslavement. We wanted the time to finally come when we would not accept blow after blow in eternal sheep-like docility. Now I have to address something that the prosecuting authority explains. We are subject to punishment because the enterprise failed, but the deed of November 8th did not fail. It might have failed if a mother had come to Eus and said, "Herr Hitler, you have my child on your conscience." But I can assure you that no such mother came. On the contrary, thousands of others came and stood in our ranks. And regarding the young men who fell, one day an obelisk to them will bear the inscription, "They too died for the liberation of the fatherland." That is the visible sign of the success of November 8th, that in its wake the youth will rise up like a storm tide and unite. That is the greatest gain of November 8th, that it did not lead to depression, but contributed to the highest enthusiasm of the people. I believe that the hour will come when the masses who are standing in the streets today with our cross flag will unite with those who shot at us on November 8th. I believe that blood will not divide us forever. When I learned that it was the police who fired, I had the happy thought, at least it wasn't the Reichswehr. One day the hour will come when the Reichswehr too will stand by our side, officers and men. The army that we have formed is growing faster day by day, hour by hour. Even in these days, I have the proud hope that one day the hour will come when these wild multitudes will become battalions. The battalions will become regiments. The regiments will become divisions, that the old cockade will be brought out of the dirt, that the old flags will once again flutter forth, that reconciliation will come at the eternal last judgment of God, to which we are willing to go. Then from our bones and from our graves will speak the voice of the only court which can sit in judgment over us. For it is not you, gentlemen, who will pronounce judgment upon us. Judgment will be pronounced by the eternal court of history, which will dispense its own verdict upon the charge that has been brought against us. I know the sentence you will pass, but that court will not ask us, did you or did you not commit treason? That court will judge us, the Quartermaster General of the old army, and his officers and soldiers, as Germans who wanted the best for their people and fatherland, who were willing to fight and die. May you find us guilty 1,000 times over. The goddess of the eternal court of history will smile and tear to shreds the prosecutor's motion and the verdict of this court, for she acquits us.